Hello everybody, welcome to another update on the stock screener. We are continuing our next episode of Verde Agritech, but we are going to go more advanced now. So we know that Verde is going to take over the Brazilian potash market. And for that to happen, they need to gain market share. So how do they do that? Either they get a better product, which they are doing with their technology, or they need to make it cheaper. So in order to get these competitors away from the Brazilian market, they need to provide a cheaper product. So let's look at the costs and how they compare now to the competitors. So what I did is I looked at the Q4 earnings of these competitors, and these are the numbers. So for Intrepid Potash, we have 38 revenue, 24 million adjusted EBITDA. Cost per ton is then 230 per ton because they sold 61,000 of potash. So these are very good numbers. So revenue and adjusted EBITDA is higher than 50%, so that's very good. The next one is Nutrien, and Nutrien had 1.4 billion in revenue, as you can see here. So these are the sales, 1.4, and adjusted EBITDA is 1053, and they sold about 3 million 3 million tons of potash, which is extremely high, and their cost is then 120 per ton. So very cheap, very high margin. Then we have Mosaic. Mosaic, this is Mosaic. And you can see here that we have 2.1 million in sales in Q4. Adjusted EBITDA was 517 million. This is the revenue, and the cost per ton is 167. I also took a look at Mosaic Fertilizantes. I have no idea why these are so bad numbers, but apparently this is 2.3 million tons. Revenue is very high, of course, but the gross margins are very low. So the cost here is 568 per ton. So this is the highest cost of all the competitors. So yeah, so these are the numbers. Then we have Verde, of course, and they sold in Q4 134,000 tons. So the 134,000 tons we need to divide, of course, by 6 because this is KCL equivalent. So when we divide by 6, we have 22,000. The revenue is 8, as you can see here. This is in Canadian dollars, so we have 8. And EBITDA of 2 million. So the cost per ton is 300 US dollars per ton. So this is pretty high. The cost is higher than the others in Q4. But we also have the numbers for this year, 2022. So these are the numbers for this year. And when you input these numbers, then you come to a cost of 2022 of 261. So the cost has gone down a bit for this year. And let's see what happens when we go to next year. And what's very interesting to do is when you have these numbers, so this was the guidance for this year, you can actually calculate the cost per ton for each quarter. So how do you do that? You take the revenue, you take the EBITDA, you subtract it, and then you have the costs, right? And then here you have the tonnage. They also give the tonnage. So now you can do divide it, and then you have the cost per ton. Okay. So the cost per ton is given here. And I put these numbers here as well, but I converted it to US dollars. These are Canadian dollars. So here I convert it to US dollars. And the production numbers are here. So I did ×4 because I wanted to look at the annual numbers. And then you get this very nice chart. So this chart gives us the profile of the costs depending on the quarter. And the one with the lowest cost is the third quarter, where they sell the highest tonnage. Okay. So the highest tonnage is in Q3. They produce 40,000 in that quarter, and that gives us a lowest cost of about $260 per ton, right? And you can see that this curve is not linear, because if it were linear, then it would go to 0. So it cannot be linear. So it needs to be exponential curve or a polynomial curve. So I took the trend line for polynomial, and this gives us a plateau somewhere in at $250 per ton, right? You could also use power, of course, but then it goes down even more. And I don't want to take this trend line. So let's take polynomial, and it would probably plateau somewhere at 250. Okay, so if you increase the curve further along, then somewhere at 3 million, which is the production of next year, we'll probably go a bit lower and be between 200 to 250. Okay, especially when you take the power curve and you increase the length, then you can see that it drops a lot, and it could even go to $200, but that I think this is a bit optimistic to go to $200 by next year. So I wouldn't rely on this. It's probably going to be somewhere 230 by next year, depending on the increase in production. Because, I mean, if you produce more, I don't think that these freight expenses are going to go down. They're actually going to go up because they need to bring the ore to places that are further distant away. But there is some good news. So this came from the feasibility studies, and you can see that operating cost is going to come down from 14 per ton to 7. Okay, so that's about $8 that it will come down. And as you know, you need to do this times 6 because this is glauconite. And for the cost per KCl equivalent, we need to do it times 6. So that's $50 that will come off of this curve. And that's the $50 that comes off from these production costs. So, I mean, next year we could probably go to 200 and maybe even less than 200 in the long term. So that's why I put the number 200 here for the costs in 2023, 2024. So as you can see, Verde's costs are going lower and lower, coming from here, and we'll be sitting between Intrepid and Mosaic and Nutrien. So that's how competitive Verde is right now and going into next year. But of course, Verde has one advantage, and that's they are in Brazil, right? They are in Brazil. So, I mean, Nutrien can have very low costs, right? And Mosaic can also have very low costs. But the problem is they need to ship it to Brazil. And they need to add all of these costs here, all of these costs. Intrepid needs to add these costs. So these are the port costs, freight and duties, freight to the farm, and dealer margins. So all of these costs will be added to these numbers. And that makes Verde very competitive because Verde is in Brazil. And that's why Verde will probably take over the Brazilian market because there is no competitor that will be lower cost than Verde in Brazil. And that was the small update, more advanced calculations, and I'll see you in the next video.